I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com. Northern Ireland has a long and troubled history when it comes to violence against women. Since 2020, a total of 28 women and girls have been violently killed in the province, frightening statistics that have led to some experts declaring that the North is in the grip of a femicide epidemic. You can understand why. Northern Ireland has the second highest femicide rate in all of Europe. And added to that disturbing data is the PSNI's questionable record when it comes to tackling domestic abuse cases. For years, campaigners have been demanding stiffer sentencing guidelines for those convicted of violence against women. And they've described the current justice system as a secondary form of victimisation for survivors. A recent research project by Ulster University found that 98% of female respondents had experienced some form of abuse or violence in their lifetime. However, the academics couldn't pinpoint one single reason for their shocking results. Instead, they think it's an accumulation of factors, some of which, as former PSNI officer James Brannigan has pointed out, are unique to the North's history. The decades of civil unrest and violence, the researchers said, helped create a sense of normalisation of disorder within family homes. And they highlighted how there is a general distrust in the North towards those in authority, which has dissuaded people from reporting cases of abuse or seeking help. Abby Lyle certainly agrees with that theory. She told Sky News that she believes there's a lot of tolerance or desensitivity towards violence. I think there's also a lot of that attitude that it's not your business, don't get involved, turn a blind eye, she added. You don't want to get involved with the authorities. That's probably still there from the times of the Troubles. I'm Nicola Tallant, and this is Groomed, an investigative series from Crime World Presents. Episode 7. All the signs were there. Jonathan Creswell's treatment of Katie Simpson and many of the other women in his circle is indicative of how some men can control and abuse in plain sight. However, the power he wielded was truly extraordinary, and there are many questions that still remain about how he was enabled to get away with what he did for so long. But there are other important questions for the North's justice system, a regime that has long been criticised by domestic abuse campaigners, and one that allowed Creswell to spin a huge cobweb of lies around the circumstances of Katie's fictional suicide attempt. Retired PSNI Specialist Domestic Violence Officer Nuala Lappin, who was the first to highlight Creswell's toxic behaviour towards women, still wonders how his domestic abuse record was not flagged after Katie's death. She also has deep regrets about not stepping in sooner when Tanya Fowles tried to report her concerns about Creswell to the police.
I didn't know it was Johnny initially. I don't believe Tanya told me. She said, I have something to tell me what you think about this, which Tanya would do fairly regularly with something. And I would say, oh, I think that's this, or we'd back and forth it. And she explained to me what had allegedly happened that morning, and that the individual had found this woman hanging, cut her down, commenced CPR, she's unconscious, but he carries her out to the car. I didn't even know at that point that he put her in a seated, upright position. And I went, that didn't happen. If she's unconscious, she's a dead weight. And that's very difficult for one person. No, that didn't happen. No, he didn't do that. So she said, well, the police are... And I said, no, before anything. And then she told me it was Jonathan Creswell. And I said, that's a murder. There is no doubt in my mind. And again, I didn't know the MO or what he had done to her. And then when we did hear it, the similarities were just incredible. And then Tanya's battle to get the police to hear her, to listen to her.
Did you have to struggle to remember who Jonathan Creswell was?
No, I didn't. There's a few offenders that I never forgot, and he was always one of them. After I dealt with Jonathan's case, as I did with all cases, I always thought, I'll hear about that boy again in the future, and it'll be... You always hoped it wouldn't be worse. Somebody that can go to that stage of violence with their partner, the person they love, allegedly, they're going to murder somebody. And then I think when I heard the story about Johnny afterwards, he gets out of jail, he's lauded, the whole community embraced him. They emboldened him. That's all they did. They emboldened him. I understand anybody that suffers domestic abuse and hears the story, oh, that would never happen to me. My partner would, loses his temper. And everybody does that. They all do it. They minimise everything without the basic understanding. If you're hit in the wrong way, you're dead. It could be accidental, but you're still dead. Your children no longer have a mother. But everybody has this, no, he wouldn't really do that to me. And I think that Johnny just became so emboldened, but he took it to another level. Like he was spouting about it. He was telling everybody as if it was this great accomplishment. I was strangled my ex-girlfriend into unconsciousness. The one thing I love about the Abigail story is where she went to. Like she became this fantastic, in the Olympics and everything. And you look at that and you go, wow, that's amazing. And what would that have done to his ego? Can you imagine? Because he was Mr. Accomplished. Nobody was as good as him. The whole community loved him. And there's this girl who comes out from underneath him and goes on, and look what she achieves. Isn't that amazing? And it does. I have said to Tanya, you look at that and you think, where could Katie have gone to? And I look back today and I know the struggle Tanya went through with the police, and I wonder, why didn't I ring it in? I know that they said to her, oh, you're a journalist and we can't. She's told me all that. And I look back today and think, if I had done it at the time, would that have saved her that stress and hassle? Would they have listened to me? I don't know. Would they have given me more credence? I don't know. I'll never be able to answer that. But I've thought back about it and thought, it just wasn't in my head. Tanya was like, right. Because Tanya is quite a formidable character too. And she's, I'm doing this. And I went, yeah, I absolutely think you're right to do it. If genuinely, if I thought she was overreacting, I would have said to her, no. The MO was identical.
It's not just about hindsight when it comes to the events immediately before and after Katie Simpson was driven to hospital by Jonathan Creswell on the morning of the 3rd of August 2020. For those who have a deep knowledge of the case, they still find it hard to believe that Creswell's lies about her suicide attempt weren't immediately dismissed and instead were believed and officially recorded. Derry journalist Kieran O'Neill started his career 30 years ago at the Derry Journal. He's worked for some of the biggest national newspapers in Ireland. He was a BBC documentary producer for a time and edited the Derry News for 12 years. He covered Katie Simpson's death and the subsequent murder trial. He also knows Derry City and its surroundings like the back of his hand. So he was the perfect guide when the Crime World team went to see the house where Katie was living with Creswell, her sister, their 2 kids, and Rose de Montmorency Wright. We met just outside Derry, and he brought us to the housing estate, from where we then followed the same route that Creswell drove that morning, with Katie's battered body in the passenger seat beside him, wearing just a t-shirt and a pair of underpants.
So when we're retracing Creswell's drive on, the road's a bit different, but it wouldn't have made much difference in terms of his journey. And so that's you coming out of there, and as you see, just rural, completely rural landscape, and then you'll just see it over to your left. You go around this corner.
I suppose they're kind of used to living out in rural places, weren't they?
But as much as it's rural, it's only 10 minutes from the city. So there you have that's Lettershandoney in front of me. It's kind of just a big, large clump of houses in the middle of nowhere. It's not. They describe it as a village, but when it was built, the first houses were built. The social housing was built in the 70s. There was no village. There was no shops. There was no, village feel. It's just a large
housing estate basically
in the middle of the rural area. And Gortnessy Meadows is, I think it's up about 5 or 6 years. So that's just been added on. So you'll be taking the next left on here.
Doesn't there seem to be even a shop, is there? There's
a shop now with the new houses, but there wasn't before.
So this is sort of all, was this all social housing then?
It's all social housing. So they were built, I think, in the 70s. There's about 150 houses on there. So that's, as I said, known as Lettershandoney. And this is all Gortnessie Meadows, the new shop. So these are up about 5 or 6 years. So the house is just, if you just drive on, that's, so here, this one. Here.
This one?
I think that's,
But sure, it's on top of the houses beside it. It's a very intimate little place, isn't it?
I'd say they were renting the house.
Yeah.
There's no indication that they owned it.
No.
And I would also believe they would probably have been the first people living in the house because they were only built. Well, Katie died in 2020. I would say they were only up a year or two at the most then. And you can even see it on pictures from the time that there was still a bit of working on, it looked like it, in the area.
But they're very, very, tightly squeezed together, aren't they? Like typically like new houses would be. I mean, how many of them were living in that house?
It was Creswell, Christina Simpson, Katie Simpson, Creswell's 2 children, and then Rose. I'd say it would have been tight. There wasn't much room. I'd say you're talking maybe 3 bedrooms, if that. I would say probably 3 bedrooms. So there's 6 of them living in the house.
And look, you can just see that the bedrooms would not have been hugely far away from one another.
It's a terraced house for all.
He was sleeping with Katie in one room and his partners in the next room, and the children are wandering around the house. It's a very strange setup, isn't it?
Yeah.
To say the least. So he would have been parked up here. I think your one Rose said she went to work.
She went to work on the morning. Christina had got up in the morning and found Creswell in bed with Katie. She then went to work about 6 a.m. and Rose left the house as well fairly early. And what we know that Shane McCluskey had been trying to phone Katie, and the police were able to establish that her phone was on the move around 7:45 a.m. that morning, and it was heading, we now know, in the direction of Grey Steel, which is about 10 minutes from here. And that was Creswell in the car with Katie's phone, taking the 2 children to his mother's. So then, on the way back from leaving the children off, Creswell phones Hayley Robb at about 8:10. And again, as we now know, that was setting up the alibi as such. So he phones her, and usually their conversations, Hayley, would have been fairly short, but this time she says that he held her on the call and kept her talking. So by the time he arrived back here, I think it was just before 8:20, he walked in the house while he was still on the phone to Hayley Robb, and then started shouting that he had found Katie hanging from the stairs, and told Hayley to phone an ambulance, phone 999, which she did. And then Creswell claimed then he took Katie down from the banister and dragged her out to the car, put her in the car. And Hayley had given Creswell's name and number to the 999 crew. So as Creswell's put Katie in the car and he's driving to the hospital from here, the 999 call handler calls him and asks him to obviously ask questions about Katie, and then tells him to pull over, start doing CPR. So it would have taken, now going from here, obviously if you're driving normal speed, it could take you less than 10 minutes to get from here to Galvin Hospital. If you were driving at speed, if you're in an emergency, you could be there in 5 minutes. So as we know that he pulls over and the call handler tells him to start doing CPR. And if the recording of that, Creswell's doing the CPR on Katie's chest, and he's calling out, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can hear him saying that, and he's pleading with, he called her about poor wee girl, and and you can hear the panic in his voice, or suspected panic at the time, about as you would be if you were in that situation. But we all know, we know now that was all a lie, that he wasn't doing the CPR on her. And we're actually at the same time, again from the investigation of Katie's phone, it's now been proven that Katie's phone was activated and put on the airplane mode, so it couldn't be tracked. So while Creswell was on the phone with this call handler, claiming to be trying to save Katie's life, even then he was calculating how he could cover his tracks.
What time is that call at,
Well, the call to the 999 call was made at 8:23 a.m. So you would have, within a minute or two of that, the call handler phoned Creswell as he says he was driving to the hospital. And then the police had also been alerted. So I think it was a paramedic team, just in a vehicle, arrived on the scene first, and they took over. They couldn't find a heartbeat on Katie, and then an ambulance crew arrived a short time later, and she was put on the ambulance and taken, obviously, to the hospital, which by stage was only a couple of minutes away. And then police also arrived on the scene, and they were speaking to Creswell, and they told Creswell to follow them to the hospital, which initially he did, but then he turned back, and he came back to the house, and he had told Hayley Robb. She then arrived at the house as well around the same time. So he arrived back at the house. Hayley Robb was here. He told her that he was going to take a cold shower, and as he was walking up the stairs, he noticed blood on the stairwell, and he told Hayley to clean it up, which he did. So he took a cold shower, had to change his clothes, and then him and Hayley then drove to the hospital, where they were met by police, and the police had officers they spoke to had body-worn camera on them, and they were able to note that Creswell had changed his clothes from when they arrived on the scene with Katie. So
did they ask him about that?
I don't think they did at the time. No, it was something that emerged later on, and obviously through the footage it was clear, what had happened. Katie's members of her family arrived at the hospital, and she had been put on a life support machine, and he then went on to, he took control of the situation, and with it, and just in that manipulative kind of controlling way that he obviously had over Katie's family, over Katie and her sister, and so many other women that we now know of. He went into that controlling mode, and was pushing the story that Katie had taken her own life, and it was heartbreaking for her family. They couldn't understand, with how this young woman has so much to live for, and obviously they didn't know about the background to the whole situation and what type of person he was.
And did they do door-to-door inquiries around here at the time?
Not that I know of, no.
They just accepted this suicide version of events?
The story was that they accepted that, and the police had done a check, and apparently, for some reason, his previous time in jail hadn't come up on the records, which is hard to believe. You think the only thing they found for him was a driving offence. So at the time, we've yet to remember too, that was August 2020, it was in the height of the COVID pandemic. The world was upside down, things weren't happening, in terms of mixing and, and just everything was done so differently. And so at the time it would have been tragic news, it would have filtered through in a community where a young girl's taking her own life. And as tragic and sad it wasn't uncommon, in terms of a young person dying that way. So in many ways it wouldn't have been attracting overly a lot of attention,
But at the same time, everybody would have been home. It wouldn't have been like a normal morning where everyone would be gone to work. In this estate, everybody was at home, locked in, and you're it's a bit of fishbowly, isn't it?
There's definitely a lot of overlooking windows.
Yeah.
There would have been a lot of people seeing, obviously, if a police car or an ambulance arrives at a house in your street, people are going to think, obviously, there's something wrong. So there would have been a lot of attention. But I would say because this was a new estate as well, and I don't think they had any roots here, but in these wee rural communities, they're very close-knit, so there was no real roots here, and it was a new house and a new estate, and they were renting, so there was, maybe through the children, they might have known all their families, through kids playing in the street.
But they could have, I don't see a huge amount of cameras or anything, but I'm sure some of the houses here have cameras if you looked hard enough. Like, it's amazing that they missed the opportunity to check the story, to check the timeline.
Yeah. Well, that seems to be the whole situation behind the police investigation, that it was a bit of a shambles from day one. They didn't do the basic checks. Of course, if someone you know, in such a tragic situation that they still, no matter what they're told, particularly in such a tragedy as a young girl dying, there has to be checks made, you know, and it seems that...
But there had to have been some hysteria. I mean, he's on the phone, he's sort of shouting down the phone to Hayley Robb that he's found her. You know, the door is... You imagine the stairs in that house is a couple of steps from that front door. He's taking a body out of the house into the car. You know, that has to take a little bit of time. It's a dead weight, he's on his own. And then he's tearing off down this road towards the hospital. Somebody along here must have seen something. But of course, they were never asked.
As far as we know. And then that's the story. You know, we don't know the true story. That's the story that
they've given.
That Creswell gave.
Yeah.
For all we know, Creswell could have put Katie's body in the car earlier, you know, maybe in darkness, or, you know, well you're talking, it was August, so it would have been light from fairly early. So
well, he got home that night at midnight or thereabouts.
But we know that he was in the house, Katie was in the house, because both Christina and Rose seen her that morning before they went to work, so we know she was in the house that night. And they arrived back at the previous night, shortly after midnight. So we know she was there. But as far as you're saying, if someone was, God forbid, you were in that situation that he claims he was in, you would be calling for help. You know, you would be screaming and you know, and you would be making a scene so that people around would be, you know, particularly in such a kind of closed-in area, would be aware of, you know, and come and help. So that's the story he put out at the time. Again, he's been, well, we know he's a
liar. And he would have had coercive control, that's been detailed in the court, over the two women that were in the house, that were the only two witnesses who sort of said she was alive when they left at 6 o'clock in the morning, or Rose at 7:15 or whatever time it was.
As far as that situation goes, all we have is Creswell's claims at the time. There was no one else. Christina and Rose had gone, the children obviously had been left to their grandmothers. There was no one else in the house. He had Hayley Robb on the call, but clearly that was all set up, and she was only told what he wanted to tell her, you know. So there's that element. There's so many parts of this story, there's so many unknowns in it, and we're never going to know because of, you know, the fact that Creswell's dead. So it's kind of there's just a lot we don't know.
And the hospital's only 10 minutes from here.
10 minutes, just and it's a fairly quick drive. You know, you're in a rural road most of the way, and then you come onto the main day, the Belfast Road, and Atlagalvin's one of the first buildings you meet. So I say, if you were in a rush from here, you could easily do it in 5 minutes.
I don't know why you wouldn't wait for the ambulance. But of course we do know why he didn't wait. It was so he could clean up the scene and then stage it to look like Katie had tried to hang herself. In December 2020, about 3 months after Katie died, James Brannigan was finally given the go-ahead by his superiors to look deeper into Creswell's story. He started by heading to the Two Horse Yards, where Jill Robinson and Rose de Montmorency Wright were working, to quiz them about the fall Katie was supposed to have suffered in the days before her death. The one that Creswell claimed caused all the bruising on her body. Despite other witnesses saying there had been no such fall, and the women's accounts failing to make any sense in parts, both of them continued to insist Katie's injuries were due to a horse. But that wasn't the only resistance Brannigan encountered as he continued to dig for the truth. Word of his work soon got back to senior officers in Derry.
I met Shane for the first time, Katie's boyfriend, and I met him at the showground in Oma. It was empty car park, freezing cold day, and he was very nervous about meeting us, and he's like, what's this about? Why are the police involved in this? And, you know, it was logical questions he was asking. So he was saying, yes, he'd been going out with Katie. He'd stay down with Katie at her mother's house on the Saturday night before she went to the show on Sunday. I said, will you text her? Yeah, it's my old phone. And I said, will you show us the text? And he goes, yeah, I'll meet you tomorrow. So I arranged to meet him the next day. Then met Paul, Lusby took a statement from him detailing everything that he had told us and got a proper statement from him. We weren't saying we're investigating because we still weren't investigating something. We were just doing some fact-finding of what's the actual situation here. The following day, I'd rang a nurse who'd gone to the police and had spoken to the nurses and had a lot of information about what she saw, what the nurses saw. And I asked her to go to the police. Went to the police. Did you tell them everything? Yeah, told them everything. And she listed off everything. She told them, brilliant. Did you make a statement? No. They said I didn't need to. And this is the police in Derry from the major investigation team. And I was like, go back and make a statement. But they said I didn't need to. He's done something, you need to make a statement. Please go back and make a statement. Okay. And it all coincided with roughly the same time. I met Shane at the Creswell Road in the McDonald's car park. And myself and my colleague got into the back. Shane gives me his phone and I see the text messages. The nice text messages between himself and Katie. The night before, when they depart at 6 o'clock in the morning, nice, and then the panic. If Johnny's going to contact you, tell him you're with your dad. And he's saying, no, why lie? Just tell the truth. And she's begging him, no, please. He'll go crazy. And then I'll never forget reading it. And he replies, Katie, he'll hardly kill you. And then she begs again, please, just do it, please. I knew at that point, right, this is the motive. This is now I'm going the murder line here. He has done something here. And I suspected, it's not that he hasn't. Listen, there is something more sinister here. I then started to compile another report, and I knew this one was the important one, and really important. The text messages, what the nurses had seen, what the family had told us, what the lies these women are telling us. And I knew so important, and my old chief inspector who had gone, he'd been promoted to superintendent, called him up and said, listen, this is my report. I need it to hit home here now. So I sent it to him. I remember when he came back and said, James, less of he's murdered her, just be a bit more balanced. And I was like, okay, point taken. So I just knew I had to get it right, and I needed that kind of objective look at it from him. And then I sent it to the superintendent who had assigned us to do the work. Then he called another meeting and said, right, I've looked at this. What do you think? And my acting chief inspector said, yeah, it's looking bad. I said, yeah, it needs investigated. And then in January, this is going to be a murder investigation. And then the pressure really kicked in. The pressure's on.
And I would see it as that at this point, so you've launched a murder investigation. There's been a lot of opportunities missed by that first team, which sort of didn't do what they should have done.
No opportunities missed, they didn't look at it.
The opportunities missed beyond belief. But you're in a position some months later that some of those missed opportunities you have to accept. So you have to build essentially a circumstantial case going forward against them.
Yeah, and it's building that. I have no problem with a circumstantial case as long as I look at a circumstantial case like an onion and every layer of it has to be fresh. If you lose any part of that evidence you have in a circumstantial case, it's rot the whole case. So everything you put in has to be rock solid. Crime scene's gone, in essence, to a point. What we had to do was go back to the pathologist, explain these bruises. He then makes a statement to us saying, looking at these bruises again, this is tramline bruising. So he said, she's been struck with a rod-type implement. So tramline bruising is where you're struck hard on an area of your body by a hard implement. You won't have a bruise where the rod strikes, but on either side you'll have a bruise. So all the bruises up her, as the pathologist said, she's been struck with a rod-type implement. This changes things. She's got it beaten at some point prior to going into hospital. I asked for all the swabs that were taken during the post-mortem to be analysed. Got a second pathologist, engaged with a second pathologist to do another post-mortem, desktop post-mortem. Got help from the NCA in relation to, they had a whole catalogue of simulated hangings and self-hangings and the difference in how to try identify them. We really worked on the whole area of the phones because now he's a suspect. What's his call data, cell site analysis, movements of the phones. So we start to build a picture before interview of where the phones are going, who they're communicating with, and what it told us on the Sunday night that Katie and Creswell's phone went up as far as Omagh, then onto Strabane, went into Lifford. 2 phones went into Lifford, back to Claudy, back to the house. But Katie's car was taken up by somebody else. And this brought me back to Abigail's Lyle's incident, where I, in my head, was thinking this the whole time. He had the phone. He's in control. And then the fear, getting her into the vehicle he was in, and just the fear he was putting on Katie and taking her on this horrendous journey that evening.
And you spoke about the banisters and all the rest of it. Your mind must have been on that. So disproving the possibility of a hanging.
Yeah, and the job was to prove that she didn't hang herself. I had to keep my team away from, well, how did she die? What caused the bruise? What caused that bruise? And my bosses, forget about how she died. Just show she did not die by hanging. And that's what we had to focus on. And we couldn't do much till we got back into the house. Then we got the DNA samples back, and then we were shocked. His DNA had been found on a vaginal swab. This is, hold on, what's going on here? And that was a big plus for us. Doesn't prove he did anything, but what is going on? What's the dynamic? Before, it was all leading up, and my concern was he's a fucking dangerous guy. No matter what, he's a dangerous guy. And we need to get him arrested quickly. But we also had to do this investigation. We couldn't talk to people. So everything was done in the office, was cell site analysis, call data, CCTV, AMPR, analysing the body cam, because when he went to the ambulance and was stopped by the ambulance, police came there, got body cam in the hospital. And the one thing before we arrested him, what is he saying has happened? So every bit of interaction he had with police, how is he saying she was hanging? And this is something we had to know before going in. So what he was saying in a nutshell was, went into the house, saw her hanging, thought she was joking, she was kissing the wood. Every time he said, she's kissing the wood. The wood is the wooden panel that runs along the stairs, that is the floor of the roof of the ground floor and the floor of the first floor, and it runs, and the spindles come down to that panel. Her feet were barely touching the stairs. All she had to do was step back. And so all he's telling us, she's kissing the wood, she's kissing the wood. And he always referred to this kissing the wood. So we looked at what he said on body cam, what he said to police when they met him in Strand Road, what he said to police at every interaction. Right, this is his story. We need to prove that she didn't hang herself. This is the provable lie we need. Coming up to the operation, because we hadn't been speaking to anybody, because you have a defined amount of time you can keep somebody in custody, usually something happens, we overtly investigate it, we let people know what we're doing, and then we can get... Here we couldn't. Nobody could know what we were doing.
You've been listening to Groomed, a Crime World Presents limited series, edited and presented by me, Nicola Tallant. Written by Jane Finnegan. Contributor and researcher, Tanya Fowles. The series producer is Ian Malini. Nasa Comiskey is assistant producer.